Welcome to the Empathic Edge.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Empathic Edge with Megan Smith, founder of Empathic Edge. Megan is an attorney, negotiation professor, and dispute resolution professional focused on the future of human communication in an AI-driven world. Through negotiation strategy, emotional intelligence, and high-stakes conversation training, she helps professionals build confidence and perform more effectively under pressure. I'm SeanOConnor, and today, Megan and I are talking about why intelligent, capable people can still struggle in difficult conversations. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Sean. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I consider myself to be an intelligent person, and I absolutely struggle with difficult conversations. So I expect to get as much out of this as our listeners. Why don't you just start off by addressing that? Why do intelligent, highly capable people still struggle?
Yeah, I think it's because intelligence or intellect and communication skills are just not the same muscle. So high performers are often very good at like analyzing, strategizing, and preparing. But then when the conversation gets hard, those cognitive tools don't really automatically transfer into real-time communication.
Hmm.
So what you need in a difficult conversation isn't really just knowledge. It's like that emotional regulation, awareness, and really the ability to stay present, even when your instincts are pushing you to really run or go towards like defense or control mode.
Yeah. Well, when you're in that, oftentimes you're in a conversation and this is turn, like it takes a turn. You don't know going in necessarily that you're going into a difficult conversation. And I'm wondering what happens psychologically when things start to feel, emotionally charged or, I don't know, tense, high stakes.
Yeah, so typically your nervous system, it starts treating that discussion or conversation kind of like a threat.
Oh.
So your brain then is shifting resources away from the prefrontal cortex,
Hmm.
which is the part that's responsible for like empathy and decision making, and then towards those survival responses. So you're not really in problem solving mode anymore. You're really in protect mode. You want to protect yourself. And the tricky part about that is it doesn't always feel dramatic. It might just creep up on you. And all of a sudden, your ability to listen well, to stay present, just kind of goes out the window.
Why do people, I mean, myself included here, you lose access to skills or, I did some preparation for this meeting with my boss or something, and suddenly I can't access it when, I definitely was prepped well before the conversation began. What's going on there? Is that a brain thing too?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the thing that happens that is really the most misunderstood. Because people tend to assume, hey, I've prepared, I've gone into this, and I know something intellectually, and they all of a sudden think that means that I can do it well under pressure.
Hmm.
But if you're to think about like high performance skills, so or fields, so like sports, surgery, or performances, these are professionals that don't just say, okay, I've learned a thing, I've read about it, I can now do it. It's in my brain, and all of a sudden that's here, right? They have to practice over and over again. It's really about that repetition. They can't just learn that technique once.
Yeah.
They have to rehearse it under simulated pressure so that it really becomes automatic or kind of rote and it's accessible even when the stakes become higher.
Mm. Yeah, I get the sort of athletic reference. You can read. It's like you can read about riding a bike, but you can't really ride a bike until you ride a bike. Uh,
Exactly.
are there patterns, like communication patterns, that show up most often once people become uncomfortable or defensive? Are there signals?
Yeah. So when we were talking about these communication patterns that come up when people become uncomfortable or defensive, for him, it was really kind of the over talking, speaking fast, and even repetition.
Mm.
And I think really the one that we see most often is over talking. And that's because people really try to fill silence with words. They think that they're regaining control or maybe avoiding uncertainty.
Hmm.
The second thing that we see a lot of the time is really position locking. So that's really where people stop exploring the conversation and then they start defending a fixed point,
Oh.
which I know happens to a lot of us where we say, hey, no, but this is what I came in believing, and you're going to have a hard time convincing me otherwise. So then we kind of get stuck in that position. And then the third big one I would say is really selective listening. So you're not actually hearing what the other person is saying anymore. You're really scanning for things that confirm what you already believe.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. So it's more of an internal process versus you can kind of witness oh, you're talking a lot versus the selective listening. Uh,
Exactly.
what about, I mean, you mentioned trying to regain control. I'm wondering how much do things like fear or uncertainty or that sort of performance anxiety, like, oh, I've really got to show up perfect here. How does that shape the way people communicate in real time?
Yeah, I would say enormously, especially fear. That's the one that I see most often. But I do think that people don't go into a difficult conversation necessarily thinking that this is going to happen, especially if intellectually you've prepared and you know what it is that you're talking about. So, a lot of people really enter difficult conversations and they're kind of carrying a performance layer on top of everything else. So, they're not just trying to negotiate or resolve something, but they also are managing how they're coming across, worrying about whether or not they're saying the right thing. And then you also have to monitor the other person's reaction in real time. So that's really kind of a mental overload and it can be exhausting.
Yeah, it's a
But then
lot.
yeah, and then you add fear on top of that. And so I would say like fear of losing or fear of conflict. A lot of people go into difficult conversations, with that
Hmm.
as a main fear, or even of being misunderstood. It
Yeah.
really then just kind of constricts everything.
Yeah, I relate to both of those. But also that dynamic, like especially it's one thing to be in a conversation with your spouse, but it's another thing to like having it happen at work where, maybe you're a manager or it doesn't really matter. You've got a role to play there and you want to be professional and all these other factors are at play. And really when you break it down like that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a lot of balls in the air. Uh,
You're doing a lot of work all
yeah.
at once,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you gotta train for that, right? Like, we aren't just born knowing how to do that. But I
Well,
think
you
we
do
think
have
that
that.
we are.
I mean, I have had that experience where you come out of a conversation exhausted,
Mhm,
so to speak, and it's sort of not it's partially sort of metaphorical and part of it's literal,
mhm.
all that
Well, and
energy.
how often are you concerned also about disappointing the other person?
Mm,
That's a huge one.
yeah, yeah, for sure. What about from your practice maybe or just daily life? Can you share an example of a conversation where, someone's communication changed once they became more aware of the emotional dynamics in the room?
Yeah, well, I notice a lot with myself, and then I can see when, okay, these skills are kicking in. I have to remind myself, okay, take a breath, and then pivot. But when you see it in other people, I tend to see it most often when they realize, oh, we were not on the same page. I
Mm,
came in making assumptions about what it is that you are saying, or especially the way that you're feeling. And it's really kind of amazing to see when somebody can self-assess in the middle of a conversation and say, "Okay, I need to pivot here," and kind of restart. Maybe not all over again, but restart at some
yeah.
point.
When you say pivot, I just want to add some because I think I get what you mean, but uh, speak to that. Just when you say, "Okay, I realize I have to pivot," so that's just simply taking a different tack, or completely like, "Oh, hold on, we need a reset here because we're not talking about the same thing." Or
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. So one thing I notice a lot with lawyers in particular, because if we're looking at litigation, it can
mm,
tend to be heated and adversarial.
sure,
So we actually recommend to our students that if they need to, take a break. So if you think that you've either reached a point where you're coming close to an impasse, um, and you need to be able to think more creatively, you've just kind of gotten position locked, and or the other side has gotten
hmm,
position locked as well, take a break or take a breath or really transition to something else. And so whether that's, hey, why don't we go ahead and table this part of the conversation for now and let's get back to that later? Or if it's, I'm not certain that we've been looking at this the same way or that we've been on the same page. how about we do a little bit more fact finding? Or how about we ask just kind of an open ended question
Mhm.
that helps both parties say, how can we be creative here? How are we thinking about this? Because especially if it's, a one on one negotiation,
Yeah.
you've got your one brain. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's good to say, okay, let's put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. How would they be thinking about this?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm thinking too in terms of on a personal level, you're in a conversation that, oh, wait a minute, this isn't the conversation I thought we were going to have, or it starts to heat up. And sometimes there's like I think it would be a very smart thing would be like, oh, hold on. I'm not prepared to have this conversation right now. L- can we pick it up later, tomorrow, whatever it might be, right? So that
Hmm.
for whatever reason, for the just for that reason, I wasn't prepared to have the conversation.
Hmm.
Uh,
I love that.
yeah.
I think when somebody does that, that's a huge sign too of emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people are lacking that ability to self-assess. And it's really important because whether it's I'm not prepared because I just haven't done the research or haven't thought through this enough, or you know what, something, bad happened to me earlier today and
Yeah.
I'm still
Still
kind of
carrying it.
nervous or yeah, exactly, still
Yeah.
carrying it. Right now would not be the best time to carry through that conversation.
Hmm.
And that can be really hard to do, especially if you have adrenaline pumping.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking a lot of times. I mean, talk about like you don't want to you don't want to be wrong. I mean, this is not the same as like sticking to your case, but I come into a conversation and I realize this is going in a direction I didn't expect. My first reaction might be that it's my fault, so to speak, that, oh, wait, I didn't do the right homework, so to speak. And so I'm going to try to just muster through. And I don't want to admit that even if it, you know, even if there was a left turn, like I don't want to say, hey, I made a mistake. I thought we were talking about X, but now we're talking about Y. So I need to pick up this conversation later. Uh, I think that a, a knee jerk reaction is like, okay, I'm just going to push through here. I don't know.
Exactly. True, yeah.
Yeah. Why do people think that, that they assume, I guess, that, communication skills are something you either have it or you don't. Like you're either funny or you're not, or, that kind of a thing.
I think it's because most people have never seen it trained. So they grew up watching communication modeled by the people around them. So parents, teachers, colleagues. And I think just starting at a young age, you tend to either absorb good patterns or they don't, not great patterns. And it's never really presented to us as a skill that requires deliberate practice.
Hmm.
So then when somebody is naturally articulate or socially comfortable, think about how many times we say, "Oh, well, they're just a natural communicator," or "They're
Right. Right.
great at presenting." It's just natural, as if it's a fixed trait. And I was thinking about this week. I wasn't on debate when I was in high school, although I wish that I was. And I mean, that's exactly what they're doing on a debate team, right? Is they're practicing and they have that
Right.
repetition.
Yeah.
And I think my friends who did high school debate or mock trial, anything like that, really excelled at communication skills and also presentation skills later on.
Hmm. Makes sense. Yeah. It's like, oh, I shot baskets every day after school. I got really good at shooting baskets. It's like, okay, speaking in front of people,
Exactly.
assembling
Yep.
an
Yeah.
argument or a story or whatever it might be. That's, it's a skill for sure. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and the more exposed you are to, like, more hard conversations,
mhm.
high stakes situations, and more feedback. So even as the older that we get,
Yeah.
you develop that through that experience. And so I think that's why I know I've said it before that, I'm a much better communicator now than I was, a decade ago, and a lot of
Oh,
that is just through that experience, and then you learn, how do people respond to this as well.
mhm. Yeah, there's that, even in real time, you're kinda modeling, right?
Mhm.
We've just got a couple minutes left. I wanna ask you, if you've seen certain habits that tend to separate people who, consistently handle difficult conversations well versus those who, repeatedly struggle with them. Are there some habits, behaviors that you've seen?
Yeah, definitely. A few things stand out. First, people who are genuinely curious rather than trying to win a conversation. So if they go in with the ABCs, the always be curious, I think they're already kind of, 10 steps ahead of the rest of us. Secondly, I think that they've learned to tolerate discomfort without immediately trying to resolve it. So they can kind of sit in tension or even silence, but without
Mhm.
collapsing or without escalating the situation. And then I think third, it's kind of what we've been talking about already. It's self-assessment or reflection.
Ah,
So after a hard conversation, they actually think about what worked, what do they wish that they would have done differently, and what would they actually take with them forward into their, next negotiation.
mm.
Um, I would say lastly too, it's practice. Like we said, right? If we're looking at high performers, they are constantly practicing their skill. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really what sets people apart.
Oh, that's good stuff. That is good stuff. We're just about out of time. I have one more question. What's your dog's name that just walked past you while you were talking?
That is Albus, named after Albus Dumbledore. He's one of 2 dogs, and he
Okay.
is our dog that is not quite as loud, but he is
He
large
could
like a
he could be in
horse.
the room during the podcast. Love it.
Exactly.
Well, great talking to you, Megan. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Really enjoyed it. Super informative, and I look forward to connecting in the future.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.
You bet. That's it for today's episode of The Empathic Edge. If you'd like to learn more about Megan Smith, Empathic Edge, and their work around negotiation, communication, and AI-powered practice training, visit empathicedge.com. Thanks for listening. And as always, we really appreciate feedback, a review, thumbs up, maybe share a link with a colleague who you think would benefit from this, or maybe a spouse or partner. And I'm SeanOConnor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.